Well, welcome to Coffee House Theology, where we discuss God, theology, and all things pertaining to life over cups of coffee. And I have a special guest. My guest today is Doug Van Dorn, and I am so happy to have you, Pastor Doug, on the podcast. And I was trying to remember how I got connected with you, and I even asked my wife, and she had no idea. But I looked on Amazon and it went back to a purchase of two of your books, Covenant Theology, which I have here on my desk, and From Shadows to the Savior, which is Christ in the Old Testament. So this is the first book. But I got them in ebook, and then I had to purchase the hard copy. Uh, And congratulations, by the way, on your books finally going to come out on Logos Bible software. Uh,
Did they actually announce that, or is it still
yeah, I
almost
got an
there?
email
Oh,
and
wow.
I pre-ordered them like,
Yeah, I know. It's
like
been on there for like
years.
8 years or something like that.
uh, Probably like four for me, but I pre-ordered them and they said they're coming out. And if you look, it says soon, coming soon. So it's already like fulfilled. They're just gonna process it or whatever. And let me say that first, that I'm grateful to God for you, because in this providence, you have from afar been an inspiration and in many ways a pastor to me. So thank you for your faithful service to Christ. You didn't even know me, and yet you still gave me the time of day, and I am so grateful. You've helped me uh, in more ways than I can express my gratitude, which is why I buy all your books.
Jose, that's very nice. I mean, we've known each other online for many years. Like you
Yeah,
said, it's probably been, I don't know, seven years or something like that. And
yeah,
I was
yeah.
trying to think, I thought that maybe I had done a podcast with you on conspiracy theories, but I guess we never did. You just didn't, you were talking about the book and I watched it, and I guess it feels like I know you. So
Well, first off, can you tell us how you came to Christ? How you are now a pastor? And I, and maybe you could tell us at some point, maybe right now or later in our conversation, how you were trying to be Presbyterian. I would really like to hear that story.
and that's funny. Well, yeah, I grew up in a Christian house, Christian home. My parents both Christians, and actually both of their parents were Christians too. And so I mean, I've grown up in church my whole life. It was Baptist Baptist General Conference, they called it back in those days. And kind of the Arminianism that I had, I accepted Christ when I was 5 years old, and as I look back on it now, in some ways I actually think that that's kind of important in some ways, just to confirm for a person. But I think I've probably been saved for a long, long, long time. I'm 54, which is hard to believe. Like time goes so crazy fast. And so that was almost 50 years ago that,
Life is but
um,
a
you know,
vapor, huh?
yeah, it is. I mean, my mom, I went up to her and said, I want to believe in Jesus and trust in Christ. And so she led me to the Lord that way, and went to Bethel College in St. Paul, Minnesota. And
That with Piper?
well, he's up there. His book Desiring God actually came out the year that I was a freshman up there back in 1988,
Oh, okay.
and I read it, and I didn't know anything about Reformed world or Calvinism. Well, I knew a little bit about Calvinism, but uh, I had only known about that for about a year. And there was this kid on our freshman floor who was this dispensationalist Calvinist, and he just was talking about the predestination stuff all the time. And, so I decided to prove him wrong and read through the Bible. And then I read through it again. And then I read through it again. And after 3 years, I said, I give up. He's right. Well, I actually just recently talked to him a few months ago, and he told me, he goes, yeah, I was new to it too. I had just, I kind of found that I thought he grew up in it or something, but no,
Oh, wow.
that was kind of funny. And, you know, coming into that reformed world, it started for me through kind of the tulip stuff and John Piper's sovereignty of God stuff. But uh, then I started cutting my teeth on reformed theology through the White Horse Inn. And back in those days, they didn't have Ken Jones, the Baptist, the token Baptist.
Okay.
They had the Lutheran, and then they had the Reformed guy and the Presbyterian guy. So
Is
they would all talk about
is Ken
their
Jones the black brother?
yeah, yeah, he's the
Okay,
Black
okay.
Baptist
Yeah,
guy that
yeah.
they brought him in sometime after 2000, I don't remember, but man, that show's been on the air for 30 years or something.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I kind of learned Reformed theology that way. They kind of were responsible for bringing me out of the dispensational world that I grew up in. But also, that was in part because I was teaching a youth group when I was a youth pastor about 1996. They wanted to go through a book of the Bible. So, well, what do you want to go through? I said, Revelation. I said, man, I don't know about Revelation. I said, I've been playing games the last few years with the Rapture in 1988, 1989, and 1994. And I said, I'll do it on one condition, that I'll teach you that Jesus could return by the end of this year. I said, 1996. And I had a logic to it because in 4004 BC, according to Archbishop Usher, Jesus or God created the world, and so exactly to the year 6,000 years later, we should enter the millennium. And so I'm
Okay.
like, all right, Jesus could return this year, and then that would be their perfect 7,000 years of history. And of course that didn't happen. And so I just said, I'm not gonna do this anymore. And even to this day, people are still doing it, right
Every
now,
year.
every year. Jesus coming back, Jesus coming back. So I kind of shelved the whole eschatology thing and started reading stuff that I didn't really realize was related to it, from guys like Meredith Klein and Greg Beale on the temple. And of all the things, right? The temple, like
Mm.
how would that possibly lead you to a different eschatology? But it did. And it also kind of opened my eyes to some stuff about baptism. So I went to seminary, and like the reason why, I mean, I went to a liberal arts Christian college. And so I decided to get a Bible minor because the Bible interested me. I mean, I'm a Christian. Why wouldn't I do that?
Right.
And got out of that. Didn't I started a business. I was a marketing major. So I started a couple of companies right out of college with a friend, and those didn't go well, but that's all right. Delivered pizzas while I did it. And I got married and I needed a job. And so I'm like, well, I have a Bible minor. Maybe I could do something like, I had heard that there was a youth pastor job in Denver. So that's really why I got into ministry. It was just practicality.
Mm.
And after that, leaving that church, like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I don't really want to go into the business world too much. So I said, I'll delay life and I'll go to seminary and just learn more of the Bible. And so then, that gets done 4 years later. And then I need a job. I can't keep delaying. I didn't really want to go on and do PhD stuff. So uh, I'm like, I need a job. Well, what should I do? Well, I mean, I guess now I'm qualified to be a pastor or something. So I tried to become a Presbyterian. That's where that comes from, because I wanted to stay in the Denver area, which is where I went to school at Denver Seminary, but there was like no Reformed Baptists that were here, that I knew of. And so I thought, well, if I could become a Presbyterian and infant Baptist, then I could probably stay here, get a job. So I tried really, really hard to do that. And I couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't make the logical argument work to me, to my satisfaction. So that's really where the baptism book ended up coming out of, was a study of that took me several years. And I think I kind of created an interesting new twist on how to arrive at credo baptism as a reformed person. And, you know, I still think it's a very unique argument that I don't see a lot of guys making. So I decided to publish it. And then I, started walking into that publishing world, and people said you should publish your series on the covenants that I did at the church. And it just kind of has turned into that. I turned the Galatians series that I preached into a book. So, we started the church I'm in 22 years ago, really out of necessity because I wanted to stay here, and said, all right, I'm loading furniture, I got an income. Why don't we see if God wants to do something with this? So the church we were in kind of sent us out to do that. And I'm still doing it 22 years later and able to do it full time. And God's put me in this weird space of like the blurry verse, and also the reformed world. There's not a lot of us that are doing that. So I'm just trying to take advantage of it, writing stuff that's related to both of those worlds, and doing podcasts and whatever, just seeing what happens. And I'll do it as long as God wants me to, I guess.
Are you familiar with Brian Suave? Or I can't even say his name. He's a musician that does hymns, but he has something Cosmos podcast, and he covers like Bigfoot and
Oh yeah, the Haunted Cosmos guy.
yes, yes.
I've talked to him on the Messenger or whatever, but I haven't actually hooked up with him yet.
Okay.
Apparently they dropped my name like 6 months ago or something like that, and my
Oh,
book
okay.
sales went
Okay.
crazy. It was
I
it was
haven't
nuts.
I haven't seen that, but yeah, their podcast is pretty good. I actually used it to go to sleep a couple times because the way they read it, it's not like they're reading it and it's got like background music, kind of like haunted.
Right,
Um,
right.
so yeah, they're into all those and they're reformed.
Yeah.
So I bought his I know you do music, right? You started learning to play guitar or something?
Yeah, I'm taking lessons from Kenny C.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Kind of fun.
Yeah, I just started because I was doing family worship with my kids, so I picked up CGD.
Yeah, yeah.
And all Christian worship is contemporary anyway, is CGD. So that's I I strum. I don't play. I strum.
Yep. I hear that.
So I bought he sells his chords because I like his songs. Uh his Psalm 2 song is really good. Um what is your so you are come what's the name of your book that you're coming out with
On
on Revelation?
Revelation, it's going to be called Rings of Revelation.
Rings of Revelation. Okay.
Rings of Revelation.
Okay. And is does this take a amillennial, post millennial
It takes an amillennial point of view, but it's a literary look at Revelation.
okay.
Try and help people understand what kind of a book that this is and how to read it.
Okay.
And uh, yeah, so it came out of I preached through Revelation maybe three years ago, and people said, "Man, you need to turn this into a book." And I'm like, I don't have time to do that. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Um, People say you need to take the time to turn this into a book, and I said I don't have time to do that. But for whatever reason, maybe 2 months ago, I just had this weird dream in the middle of the night, and I woke up and I went down to the computer. I just started writing, and within I don't know 2 weeks, I had pulled all this material from all these sermons, and it was a book. So we decided to put it into two books. There's going to be like it's not going to be a study guide, but it'll be more like a resource guide that will have all these charts and outlines and Old Testament quotes in Revelation and chiasms and all this kind of stuff. And then that will support the main book, which I call Rings of Revelation. It's named after this idea of a ring composition. And a ring composition is really where you start at one place and then you write, and then you end up at the same place that you started at.
Hmm.
And, in the biggest picture, that's really what the book of Revelation is, as a ring composition. But there's so much more to it. And it's so completely crazy and fascinating and interesting. And it interweaves with the Gospel of John in really wild ways. So
Okay.
that both of those books actually have the very same central idea literarily, which is basically that Satan is cast down and Jesus is lifted up on the cross. And so these books are working together in tandem. So the book's going to teach people how to understand and read that. That's the first half of the book. Then the second half of the book takes those principles and then applies them to really many of the supernatural things that you find throughout the book, starting in chapter one, going all the way to the end of the book. And so that's where we will deal with the chapters and looking at the mark of the beast and all this other stuff. But it's really focusing on the supernatural parts of it. So I'm
Okay.
excited about it. It, I
Sounds great. I
yeah,
I just got Ken Gentry's
yeah,
finally.
I just got that too.
Okay.
I had an early copy of it. I had
Oh,
it in
did you?
PDF when I preached. So I promised the guy who gave it to me, who said that he would give it to me only if I bought it when it came out, that I would do that. So I bought it.
Okay. Yeah, I bought it too, and I belong to this Facebook group, post millennialism something, and it's got a huge long name. Uh and I got mine signed, um and because I pre-ordered it or whatever.
Yeah.
And some people were complaining like, I didn't get it signed.
I didn't get mine signed. I pre-ordered it.
I think you were supposed to leave that in the comments
Oh,
uh when you ordered it through his website. He's been that's another. I have like all your books on my shelf, and well, right now on my desk I have almost all of his stuff on a shelf. RC Sproul's another one.
yeah.
May he rest in peace. I love Darcy. I literally wept. You know how when Michael Jackson died, people wept. I didn't
Yeah.
weep for Michael Jackson. I wept when RC Sproul.
Yeah.
um, so I do you I mean, you talked about how the rings and the literary with John and the Gospel of John and Revelation is Satan is defeated, and it's, do you see that promise of Genesis 3:15 fulfilled in that?
Well, it's fulfilled in an already not yet way in my reading of it. So it's fulfilled in a legal sense.
Right. Okay.
And so that's really why I'm an amillennialist, because when I read Revelation 20, well, it's more than just that. It's also the literary structure of it, in my opinion. But when you read Revelation 20, you see that he's bound at some point, and it tells you why, so that he will no longer deceive the nations. That's the only reason it gives for him being bound. Well, and this is where kind of a divine counsel perspective that I got through Dr. Heiser um, has actually helped me see this even better, although I don't think he ever intended for it. But this idea that Satan was deceiving the nations fits right into that, because in the divine council worldview, which is this idea that there's a heavenly group of beings that God gave rights to administer and rule over the nations as kind of a punishment, really. And they're called the sons of God in Deuteronomy 32:8. Um, that the promise was that the Son of God would, first of all, receive Israel as his inheritance. And then later in Psalm 2, that if he asks, he'll receive the whole world as his inheritance. Then Psalm 82, which is about judging these heavenly entities for how they rule so wickedly, that now the Son will inherit all the nations. And what that means is then started really at the day of Pentecost, where you have all these nations that are gathered together. And then all of a sudden, it's a reversal of the Tower of Babel, where they start hearing in their own speech what Peter is saying. So at Babel, there's one speech and then it's broken into all these other speeches and then they're scattered because of it. But here, they're all gathered together, just like at Babel, but now they're all hearing from one speech in their own speech, and it's the gospel. And the reason why that's significant is because in Deuteronomy 32, 7 and 8, this dispersion of or allotment of these heavenly beings to the nations took place at the Tower of Babel. And so what you find at Pentecost as a reversal of Babel is that now Jesus is taking back the nations through the gospel. And why can he do that? It's because he now has a legal right to do that. He has the legal right to now um, overthrow this inheritance that was given to Satan because he's been disinherited in a legal sense. So if the gospel comes to somebody and God wants to open their ears to believe it, there's nothing Satan could do. That was simply not true prior to Pentecost. You had to come to Israel. You had, hardly any Gentiles at all even did that. And in the world where they were scattered, they were in darkness. Paul says in Athens, to Athens, you're groping around in darkness and God's been near you, but you haven't been able to see him because you've been blinded. So that's a legal thing. But in my understanding of the binding of Satan is that it's not absolute. So growing up in like a dispensational or premillennial way of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
Satan's binding is absolute. Like he's not there. He's completely gone. And so then you don't have anybody dying. You have no more sinning going on for 1,000 years, all this kind of stuff. But I don't think that that's what the text actually tells us. It just says he can't deceive the nations. So in my view, I can have Satan roaming around like a roaring lion, simultaneous to Satan being bound to no longer deceive the nations. And that's kind of the way that I think about it.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting stuff. Uh, how did you, well, before I get into the Giants question, uh, the way we got to doing this podcast is I don't know how I, on my phone, Bing did a AI thing and I sent you the screenshot and I said, one, is it right? And if not, like, uh, uh, is it, you know, what's accurate? And so my question would be, what do you make about AI? And should
Oh, yeah.
Christians get involved in using it or staying away from it?
That's a good question. Yeah, you had put my name into one of the AIs and it gave back some information that was some of it was right and some of it was wrong. Um, then a couple other people, when I posted that and I said something like, don't trust AI,
Okay,
then a
yeah,
couple
yeah.
people, they screenshotted two different AIs that actually got almost all of it right. I couldn't believe it. So
Oh, wow.
what my, I could be wrong about this. I am no expert in artificial intelligence and I know what people are saying, but I also know what other people are saying. And as of right now, I think that AI is just a really, 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 really fast computer that's able to pull tons of information in a microsecond and then be able to spit it back out. So that's why you can get things that are true and things that are false, because it can't distinguish between what's right and what's wrong and what it's hearing. It
Right.
can also be programmed very diabolically. That's been
Yes. Yeah.
absolutely clear. Like there are woke AIs, and that should
Yeah.
not be the case if it's a real thing.
Yeah.
But that said, so is it really just a super, super powerful mega computer? Or could, I wonder about this, could like Satan or demons or something like that somehow interact with the artificial intelligence? And I don't rule that out. I mean, there's a whole metaphysics of like what the internet is. There's even a metaphysics of what electricity is. People never ask these questions. They ask, what's the physics of electricity? I kind of want to know what's the metaphysics of electricity. Like when we plug in an iron into a wall and we feed off this energy, what is that? You know, are we tapping into the other realm? I mean, I don't know. Certainly that realm comes here. There's an interaction at the very
Right.
least with what's here, but like these creatures are creatures of light. So, I mean, what are we messing around with? Just even in the communication we're using here, I'm not trying to demonize the internet. It's as one of my old professors used to say, technology is not good, it's not bad, and it's not neutral. All technology does some things good, some things bad,
Right.
and it's
Right.
never neutral.
Right. Right.
It uses us and we use it.
Right. Right.
So, artificial intelligence, I mean, I don't even know where it's going to go. Is it possible for us to actually create a living being? I mean, Star Trek's been dealing with that question, right, for 60 years or whatever. I don't know. I kind of tend to think probably not, but who knows, man?
Yeah, because that I mean the term artificial intelligence that it's gonna learn, but it's programmed like uh uh I can't remember who. Someone was online saying, "Oh, are you familiar with Mark Dice?
I know the name, yeah.
He's a guy that does videos news analysis from his kitchen table, and I have a lot of his books too. And he typed in happy white family, and it would say, "Oh, AI cannot
Right,
discriminate." And
right.
then he put in a bunch of, and it would be showing images, happy black family, and then it would generate a single mom, no dad, uh, uh so it's completely like woke, because it's programmed.
Because
you
it's
know
programmed, right?
you hear these evil masterminds that say they want to get a perfect gospel using AI or the Bible, or you know what do these godless pagans know about the gospel? And uh so uh are you familiar with Andrew Torba?
I don't know.
He's the founder of Gab. He's a Christian,
Yeah, okay, yeah, I
and
am.
he's one of the guys that, like, Christians should be not scared of it, but using it, kind of like Luther's printing press. It 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 promulgated the gospel, and uh
The thing is that a printing press can only do what you put on it, right?
right,
But the AI has at the very least the ability to change the way it spits information out, giving you the impression that it's alive or something.
right, right.
And and like you
I mean, it
said,
is super fast. I have
yeah,
the subscription in Logos. They did and it's using like AI to
hmm
summarize um like a passage, or
hmm
but I did a survey, and I didn't like that it generated like from the books that I use the most. It didn't
exactly.
like give me the books that I own, but I don't really access. So
I mean,
it
that's exactly what the whole internet has become. It's like we're all in our own little echo chamber, whether it's on Facebook, because you're only seeing certain posts from certain people because it's deciding what you should be seeing, what you shouldn't. I mean, that all kind of started with marketing, really. to target market who you are, but they've used it to manipulate politics and the way that we're thinking and talking to each other. And Google search engines are doing the same thing. Like they're withholding all kinds of information from us. Um, some in the name of good and some in the name of bad. Like it knows what the things you search for. So it'll show you those sometimes. But if it's a politically sensitive thing that they want to censor, then they won't show you it at all.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah. So
Well,
we need to like, I don't think we should be afraid of AI, but if we're not going into it with our heads on our shoulders, understanding the power of this tool to manipulate us, then it's just foolish.
right. Right. Yeah, I was like one on the survey, I was like, I don't think I'm getting my money's worth because I'm gonna already go to those tools that it's like 9.95 a month or
Oh, wow.
something. And then it's a limit because uh of whatever it's generating. Um, but again, it's only giving me the resources that I already use that
Yeah. I
are
saw
private.
something like that in Logos too, where you could have it translate one of your German books or something, but it will only go up to a certain amount of text and then you're done. So I'm like, well, that's dumb. I can go to Google and it'll translate it for me unlimited.
Yeah. Uh, so much to make a buck, I guess. But speaking of censoring, you were taken off Facebook twice, right?
Yeah, I was back in 2020, twice within 3 months, I think.
And then did I ever tell you I wanted to share through Messenger um Hunter Biden's files, and then I got this weird pop-up that I've never seen. I took a screenshot of it. I don't know where that picture is. Um, but it said the information you're about to submit is dangerous.
Yeah.
And it was like, you got to be kidding me. They're like reading my messages and preventing me from sending these Hunter Biden files. It's crazy.
3 years ago, you probably will remember this. This was right after I took my third Facebook um, up, and that's what I have still to this day because I've never got the other two back. And I'm like, I'm still going to fight these people. So I would have all these political messages, but I would put like at percent signs instead of the letter A, or I'd put like a zero instead of the O, or a capital I instead of an L, all this kind of stuff to try and mess with it. And so it really looked like funny. I thought, okay, well,
Yeah.
I can fool whatever it is that's reading this. And then I started realizing they don't even care about that anymore because they're doing in terms of posts now is I think they've changed tactics. Instead of just kicking you off their platform, they just throttle you down so that only two people will see your post.
Yeah. Yeah. It's if they
Did you
don't
ever did I ever tell you why I got booted from um
no,
the first time?
no.
This was crazy, man. Like this was really nuts. So I started listening to the conspiracy theory that you must not be named, and it starts with the 17th letter of the alphabet
Hmm.
and ends with it. And there was some discussion about how August would be a hot month, and so at the same time I started seeing some of these shows that I was watching. They were showing all these massive warehouse fires or oil well fires, and they were all over, man. 2020 was crazy, so I created a meme of just six of them,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you might have seen it. So this
Yeah,
was
I did.
nuts. This was nuts. It got fact checked by USA Today. It went viral. I got
Your
like
meme.
the guy that I listen to the most, that I post on Facebook every once in a while. I should go listen to this X show. Um, he actually posted it. So somebody else had taken it and added some words to it. Like I think I said something like in the last 24 hours these had occurred. And then somebody else added something. So USA Today Fact Book checked it and then they said it's something like it's a sort of true or whatever. Or these were real fires, but it didn't all happen in the last 24 hours. And it was actually like 36 hours or something. That was their way of saying that
Yes,
it was
yes.
fake news.
Yeah.
And then what happened is Facebook, for whatever reason, saw that meme, and because of the USA Today fact check, dude, they shut down my account because of that.
And what did you do the second time?
I don't remember. I probably was just spouting off
Yeah, yeah.
something else about
Like
the
my
same.
shirt says,
Yeah,
truth
exactly.
is.
No, I don't remember the second one. But yeah, they dropped me twice. The second one was right before the election, as I recall.
Yeah. So if you are suppressed or straight out booted, you can be trusted.
You're probably
Right.
over the target, would be my guess.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Isn't it crazy? Like now all these doctors can say about the jab, that it's, and they're everybody's coming out with it. Even Chris Cuomo,
Yeah.
now he says he's injured because of that. Um it's just crazy, and you couldn't, and now he's straight out saying he's on ivermectin.
Yeah. People lost their livelihood 3 years ago for doing that.
Yeah. Do you think people are gonna I see some people are winning in the courts. Do you think that they should pursue uh these companies that fired them, or
I mean, yeah, I don't think that's going to do any good on a small level because they have almost infinite amounts of dollars, but class action lawsuits would be fantastic. I would really like to see some of those start to pop up. Make these companies fork out trillions of dollars,
right, right.
bankrupt them. That's the only thing that's going to stop it.
Yeah. So I've been watching your Giants Steps podcast. That's the name of it, right?
Yeah, giant steps.
Giant Steps. And I purchased that documentary that took you to Israel.
Uh
How
huh.
was that experience?
Oh man, that was fun. That was crazy. I got this call from a guy. That was in 2019, so it would have been March 2019 or something. So a year before COVID. Calls me at like 6 in the morning, and I thought, and I better answer this because only people from my church that are like in emergency call me that early. So I answered, and I happened to have been really sick that day, and I'm like, "Hello," and he goes, "Hey man, so calling from this place, and I have a TV company, and I want to come out and interview." And I'm like, "What? Who is this?" I said, "I'm really sick, man. 6 in the morning," and he goes, "Oh, I totally didn't even think of that. I'm out on the East Coast." And then he kind of slowed himself down and told me what was going on, and it was a very funny exchange. He's the guy that actually now produces the Giant Steps podcast for me, Rudy.
Rudy, okay,
So
yeah.
yeah.
I saw him on the footage. So
So he came out to my place, and we just did a spot for what was going to be that documentary in
and
my
how did he
office
hear
here in
of you?
Colorado. What's that?
How did he hear of you?
I was actually the CEO of his corporation. I forget what network he worked for. A big Christian network that made most of their money off of doing reruns on TV.
Okay.
And then they had a Christian, I think they still do have a Christian side thing to it where they make movies and stuff like that, documentaries, TV shows, whatever. So that's what he was doing, was making a documentary. He had just his boss had read that book, the Giant book, my
Okay.
Giant book, and for whatever reason they just started talking about Nephilim, and the guy goes, "Oh, here's I get the book you should read. You should do a show on that." So Rudy got like really fascinated with it really quickly, but he was totally green when he met me. He didn't know anything about what he was really doing with this subject. And so, when we got done with my interview, he goes, "Hey man, how'd you like to come with me to Israel?" And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, in about 2 months, we're going to go out there. That would be great to have you." So I said, "Okay." So that's how it happened. I could have been in more of the show, but they didn't plan for the budget. He wanted to bring me out to Peru and other places, but
Is
got to go to
this
Israel and
is
see
this
some of that
places
stuff.
where they have where they've discovered like bones of giants and stuff, or
Well, so we went to Israel to look at really the Serpent Mound that was in my book that I discovered on Google Earth. I'm writing a book with Dr. Judd Burton on it right now, and I write about that in the Giant book. And he wanted to go out there and film, especially at that spot, and then at Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus talks about the gates of hell, and then just do a
I
little
found
stuff
that
into.
very fascinating in the documentary.
Oh yeah, it's completely
Extremely
wild.
fascinating.
It is. The more I've dug into it, the more really, really crazy the whole thing is.
Now, this is the book, uh,
Yeah, that's our 10th anniversary edition
10th
that
anniversary
came out last
edition.
year.
I have
And that's the old version. I put about two and a half, probably about 2.5 to 3 chapters of new material on the 10th anniversary edition. So it's worth getting if people, and don't buy the first one if you haven't got it at all. Buy the second one.
or if you just want to fact check them.
And then buy the first one.
Hey, the font on the first one is more my
Your
it's
reading
bigger.
size.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kept the link about the same page wise because I made the font smaller.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
since I'm old, so since I mostly just read PDFs online, I don't care what size the font is. I'll just put it in an
you
older
just
size
enlarge
font.
it.
Get my reading glasses out.
Yeah, I was starting to read it with my son because I told him I was going to do the podcast, and I've been watching. I was very fascinated by your Giant Steps podcasts on the mountains that you did
Yeah.
and the
I mean, that's the stuff that I
significance. Can
learned
you
really
talk
about
about that?
I was telling you about Meredith Klein and Greg Beale in my journey into kind of the eschatology and stuff like that. And they were a stepping stone to me to get into Dr. Heiser's stuff on the Divine Council. And they were a stepping stone for me to jump into a new eschatology. And uh, the whole cosmic mountain motif it's a major thing. Basically, anytime God covenants with someone, he does it on a mountain. I don't even know if I brought that up in the podcast, actually, now that I think about it. I might have. But if you think about from our perspective as covenant covenant theologians, right? The Garden of Eden is a mountain according to Ezekiel, and this is where the covenant of works is made, and it's also where the covenant that God makes with Adam after the fall, kind of this gracious covenant. Some would call it the covenant of grace if they're Paedo Baptist. That's on a mountain. Ararat with Noah, Genesis 9 on a mountain. Uh, Mount Moriah with Abraham, where he makes the covenant or reconfirms the covenant. Mountain. Mount Sinai, mountain. David, temple, mountain. Uh, and even Levi with his Levitical tabernacle, it's a picture of Mount Sinai, or well, it's a picture of all the temples, is really what it is. So, mountain. And the new covenant, you have Jesus, on, for example, the Mount of Beatitudes or Mount Calvary when he dies on the cross, mountain. Like this is very significant because mountains are viewed as these connecting places between heaven and earth. They're like these conduits. The pagan version of that is a pyramid or a ziggurat. In fact, that's what Tower of Babel is. It's a man-made cosmic mountain where it's man's attempt to get up to God. And so think of a mountain where it has its base on the ground, but its top in the air or in the heavens. And so you can see that it's acting as an intermediary place, a middle ground. Jacob's ladder is actually a ziggurat too. It's the same idea. And the angel's going up and down on this thing. If you've ever seen, if you know what a ziggurat is, it's a pyramid structure that has a stepped um, uh,
Like the ones you find in
incline or whatever.
like South America.
Yeah, South America has them. There's famous ziggurats that are in Babylon, ancient Iraq, and they'll usually have a stairway that goes up, and that stairway on these ziggurats is really what is being depicted by Jacob's ladder. And so you have God at the top, you have angels going up and down, Jacob at the bottom. God is confirming a covenant with Jacob there, and then Jesus tells us that he becomes the ladder in the end of John 1, upon which the angels will ascend and descend, because he becomes essentially the living embodiment of the cosmic mountain. He's the link between heaven and earth. He is how we approach God. He's how God condescends to us. He's how we um, pray to God through the priest. He's the middle.
Right.
He's the intercessor. And so then the pictures of him going onto these mountains to do his work is just more symbolism of what's going on. Very, very interesting. The kind of one of the final cosmic mountains is actually Armageddon. Uh, People think of that as a giant plain, the plains of Megiddo, but it's really Har is the word in Hebrew for a mountain, and then Megiddo or Me'od, if you take John and you understand what he's doing when he says in Hebrew it is. Why does he do that? It's because he's giving you the actual spelling. And Har Ma'od is the Mount of Assembly. This is you find this in Isaiah 14, I think verse 12, 13, where the Hillel ben Shakar, this being like the son of Dawn or whatever his name is, he ascends above the stars of heaven, and it's this kind of ancient story of, in my mind, Lucifer before the fall. And then he says, I want to sit on the top of the Mount of Assembly, Har Me'od. Well, that's what the Harmageddon is. And it's a cosmic mountain final battle sort of a thing. The
Okay.
church at the bottom and Satan attacking it, and God coming to put a stop to it.
So in some eschatologies, that's a literal, you have to go to that mount like Jesus
Right.
to come.
Exactly. Or the planes, if they have it as a plane. Yeah. In my eschatology, I think that what's happening there is that's becoming a picture for what the church is. And so I think of it more as a worldwide attack on Christ's church in the last days that um, will be everywhere, and that God will put a stop to it, however long that takes. I don't know. Read the
What
book.
what yeah. What in the documentary, uh is it Mount Hebron, where
Man, Herman.
Hermon, where the sons
Yeah,
of God come down? Now, is this, where do you get that from? Is it just
that's ancient tradition that is found outside of the Bible. The Bible does not contradict it at all, and I would argue that it um, implies it, or it rests upon it. But that's you find the main idea for it in the book of First Enoch, where it's an expansion of the Genesis 6 story with the sons of God coming to the daughters of men and having Nephilim. Well, that book of Enoch tells you that they did this in the days of Jared, who's he, the great grandfather of Noah, and that they did it. They came down onto Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is the tallest mountain in Israel by like double, 9,300 feet approximately, and you can see it forever and ever away. And it happens to be on some very, very significant latitude and longitude, which is uh, another story, but very interesting. And Israel is not the only people that remember this. So even the Babylonians talk about in their literature how the Anunnaki came down on Mount Hermon back in ancient days. So
Hmm.
this was a tradition that was known. There was actually a stone, a giant memorial stone that was found on the top of Mount Hermon back in the 1870s by the guy who actually did the Jack the Ripper case. He ended up being also an archaeologist and worked for, the British Royal, whoever that sent him out. And as he was doing excavation work on the top of Mount Hermon, he discovered the highest temple of the ancient world. And near this temple, there was this giant stone um, carved in Greek, and it said something almost exactly what you find in First Enoch chapter 6. I don't have the words in front of me, but basically something like those who took the oath are cursed, or something like that. So almost word for word. And so that shows you that this was known from some time long, long ago. He actually ended up having to break the stone. He cut it in half, and because it was too heavy to take down, and they ended up putting it in the British Museum where it is to this day.
Oh wow. Uh, Concerning extra biblical literature, you're a pastor. You don't recommend the Book of Mormon. Uh,
Well, I
how?
would recommend people read the Book of Mormon,
Right,
but I don't recommend that they believe that the Book of Mormon is the Bible,
right. So
right? So that's the
how do you
difference.
view extra biblical literature like
Yeah,
Maccabees or the
great
Book of
question.
Enoch? You
Great
know,
question. I just did a show on this with another Reformed Baptist guy that I've been working with, named John Moffat, and we talked about this fairly recently, although I don't think that it's released yet. And so this is a really important question. And the way that I like to tell Christians about it, especially Christians who get really squeamish about something like First Enoch, um, or you'll hear other books thrown out there like Jubilees or Jasher or whatever, and they're like, you should never read that kind of stuff.
right,
We have that we've inherited, and I don't not quite sure where it comes from. Uh, really cynical look at ancient literature that isn't the Bible, as long as it comes from those ancient days. Now, if it comes from something like the church fathers were not as bad, if it's something like Calvin or Spurgeon, we have no problem with it at all. Like I can read that all day long and nobody gets mad
right,
about that.
right,
So what I tell people is, look, you're already reading extra biblical literature and you think it's fine to do it. Why? Well, there's probably several reasons. One, you're not coming to it thinking that it's the Bible. Okay, so that's one thing that can help you when you understand extra biblical literature's out there. Don't treat it like it's the Bible. Don't think it's the Bible. Don't presuppose that it has anything to do with that. Don't think that somebody is saying it's the Bible. Now, in a couple cases, some people think, like First Enoch is accepted as canon in the Ethiopian church, or the Apocrypha is accepted as deuterocanonical in by Rome and
mm-hmm,
that kind of stuff. Yeah, so there are a couple of books out there, but what you should think about that is you should say, look, especially as a Reformed Christian, I have the belief that everything, this is what the first chapter of the confession tells me, everything that I need for all obedience, faith, and life is already given to me in the 66 books. And I can tell you right now that there's nothing in these other books that adds or subtracts, well, it adds to that. Some of them might subtract from it, which is why you don't believe it's scripture.
right,
Um, some of them will concur with it, so they'll be in agreement with that. But that doesn't mean just because somebody agrees that the Bible's true, it doesn't mean all of a sudden they become the Bible too. Any more than Calvin, who agrees with the Bible, becomes the Bible because he agrees with it. That doesn't make any sense.
right,
Um, Also, don't be scared by the chapter and numbers that come with these ancient books. All that is a division marker, a way to footnote it when you're writing or talking about it. I mean, Josephus is done this way. Homer and Hesiod are chapter and verse. So don't be scared off by that just because you read it, your Bible has that, and then you see other books do too. That doesn't mean somebody's saying that it's the Bible. It's just a way of note
right.
of doing footnoting. So to me, those are the most important things. And then understand that these books were very well respected, and they were basically like the commentaries of their day. They help you understand what the ancient person was thinking, and they give you a context for what they were thinking about as opposed to what you're thinking about.
Right.
And if you treat them in those kinds of ways, then I think that they're extremely beneficial.
Right.
And also, and one more thing, everything that they say is not a lie. And a lot of people kind of have that idea. Well, it's not in the Bible, so it must be a lie. No, that's not the case at all. You can
Right.
read First Enoch and you can read through it and go, "Wow, this is what people believed." And then you can read the other 30 Jewish works that we have that all tell you the exact same thing about the story of the flood and the Watchers and the sons of God and the Nephilim. And you can come away from that and say, okay, so every single person believed this and nobody believed anything else. Well, maybe I should take that into consideration when I interpret the Bible myself.
Right. And then there's also the other view of, see the church as nefarious. It
They're
took these.
keeping us from reading the full Bible, that kind of stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh
yes.
yeah. I mean, I'm running into this stuff all the time, especially in conspiracy circles. uh, this would become a really popular like trope or something that the Roman Catholic Church deliberately suppressed a
Right,
hundred different books that
right.
should be the Bible. That's nonsense. It's just
Because
absolutely
Constantine picked
ridiculous.
them, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So that's a great point, though. Just because somebody else is out there telling you that these books are the Bible and that the church suppressed them, it doesn't mean they're right.
Right,
And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't read those books either at the
right,
same
right,
time. That's
right,
that's throwing the baby out with the
right.
bathwater.
We have the truth in the 66 books. We can be sure that we have the complete Word of God in our Bibles. That these are helpful to fill in gaps that, I mean, because Jude mentions the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is cited through the Bible. Um,
Always positively too, never negatively.
okay, right.
It's not, in fact, I don't know any of the ancient books where the Bible cites that book and then says, now you shouldn't believe that.
Right,
You know,
right, right.
there's the the text that Paul talks about Jannes and Jambres opposing Moses. I forget if that's in Timothy or something like that, right?
Yeah,
Well, it's like, well, where did he get those names from? Doesn't come from Exodus. Well, it comes from extra testamental books. I think in that case, the Testament of Moses. Could be wrong about that, but I think that that's where the tradition comes from. And he doesn't say Janus and John Brace. Oh yeah, by the way, that wasn't actually their name, so stop believing that silly book. He doesn't say that. He just quotes it as if this is the tradition everybody knows, and then he moves on.
he quotes their poets, right?
Yeah, he quotes a
In
Greek
Acts
poet. He doesn't.
17.
Yeah, because what he's trying to do is show that this Greek poet had enough natural light in him to recognize that there's an unknown God, and we in him we live and move and have our being
Right,
basically.
right. Yeah. Um, so it's almost like we're very inconsistent in our application of our thinking. You know, we run into all those inconsistencies. Like when you were talking about giants, and I was thinking about um in your book you say we align ourselves with liberals when we take an anti-supernatural view
Yeah.
of the sons of God going into the daughters of men. Um, and I was thinking about this because we uh like people that are crude that come against the Bible will say the virgin birth, God raped her, or a Mormon view of
Right.
uh you know which the Christians, we do not take that view, right? But we impose that to these sons of God, right? We now all of a sudden demand that, well, they need to have the anatomy. Like that's a big hang up, I think, for my son, as like God didn't make and he was like, it says they neither marry, right? Well,
Right. Right.
you don't need to be married to have sex.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
But
They're
can
called
you
men.
expound on that?
They're called men. They're the very same Hebrew word that's used for humans, the word ish, is used of angels. So, for example, in the Sodom and Gomorrah story, it starts off and it says, I forget if it starts off with men or angels. It uses one of those words. And then a little later in the story, it uses the other one. So they're interchangeable. So somehow these are men. You go, okay, well, so are they humans? No, because there's two words in Hebrew that describe men, and one of those words is Adam, and Adam is never used for angels. Only Ish is used for angels. Adam is used for humans, and Ish is also used for humans. So somehow we don't share Adamness with them, but we share Ishness with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and to me, that kind of helps explain how something like that could happen biologically. But even then, you don't necessarily have to have biology even being involved. You could have genetic manipulation taking place, just like people are like mad scientists. That's what they're doing today with pigs and human hearts and all other kinds of stuff that they're doing. So there's different ways that you can possibly think about it.
Well, and if you're dealing with a supernatural being or entity, that's not a it's not out of the realm that we can't explain it. Like, you know, the hypostatic union of Christ.
Oh yeah, I mean that's your point is that look, we're as conservative Christians, we have doctrines that we believe like the virgin birth. That a liberal will go, that's nonsense. That's absurd. It's stupid to believe that.
Right,
But then when we come to Genesis 6, we say that's nonsense. That's absurd. It's stupid
right,
to believe that.
right,
And it's like that's so inconsistent. And in
right,
fact, I point out that when you look at the greatest minds of the early church and then the Reformation who looked at Genesis 6. You want to know what their argument is of why we shouldn't believe it was angels? It's because that's stupid, it's absurd, and nobody should believe it. That's
right,
their
right.
argument.
Yeah,
They don't actually give any textual evidence. They
right,
just say they call anybody who believes that mad fools,
right.
quote unquote. It's not an
Yeah,
argument.
they're not dealing with the
It's
text.
just
Uh, uh,
dismissal.
right.
And that's what liberals are doing to the virgin birth or the deity of Christ or the resurrection of the dead or whatever it would be.
Yeah, I heard a Arminian pastor. He wouldn't call himself Arminian, but he was gonna do Romans 9, and he says at the outset, he says, "I'm gonna give you a summary of Romans 9. It's whosoever wills." And then and then he goes on to say that, you know, Jacob and Esau, before they did anything good or bad, in order that God's purpose and election may stand, he starts talking about all of the things that Jacob did. And so he's like, that's why he, yeah. So,
You don't like something, and so you just don't believe it.
right, right.
Pretty much that simple. I tell
Yeah,
people about predestination, and it's the same thing with Genesis 6. It's not hard to understand, it's hard to believe.
right, right,
Like you
right.
can read Romans 9 is not hard to comprehend.
Because,
Predestination is not a
I
hard
mean,
thing to,
the text
it's
is
pretty clear.
is clear, yes.
Yeah.
And you're reading into the Sethite view is reading into the text something that's not in the text, right? You're imposing that these righteous line went into the unrighteous daughters of Cain, but then it doesn't, there would be more giants because I talk to many unbelievers. I mean, believers that marry unbelievers.
And not a lot of giants are coming from that.
Right, right.
Exactly.
Uh, I had a question um about the mountains and Hermon. Can that still take place, or did God shut that door, or how does
Well,
that
that
impact
is a
to us?
$1 million question because the Genesis 6 story tells us the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. So that's before the flood and also afterward. So the question becomes, well, how did they get there afterward? And so you have different logical possibilities. One would be that, like one of the giants hitched a ride on Noah's Ark or something. That's an old Jewish fairy tale version of it. Another one would be that they weren't all destroyed because it was a local flood. Some people believe that. I don't think that that local flood idea makes a lot of sense of the text. Uh, Another one would be that the genetic m- markers were somehow present with somebody on the ark, and so usually somebody like Cain's wife comes in. That's a possibility, but it doesn't seem to me to make a lot of sense of the whole point of destroying this line in the first place. And then the last possibility is that it happened again. And so that's the one that I tend to think is probably right. Now, it didn't happen with the same group of fallen angels because they were locked away into Taurus, as Peter tells us, and Jude says.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean a different group couldn't have come down and done the same thing. So if you go over to your Greek mythology, it can actually help you understand, at least conceptually, what I'm talking about. Because you have this thing called the Gigantomachy and then the Titanomachy, where you have these titans, Kronos and Rhea, and all these first generation or second generation gods, and then they have a battle with the Olympians, who are their children, and the Olympians end up casting them into Tartarus. Well, then what happens after that? Well, the Olympians with Zeus at the top are enthroned. And then what does Zeus do? Well, he starts having sex with all these human women, and all these demigods come out.
Right.
That's literally exactly what I'm saying could be a possibility, is that you have that sort of a thing. Now, I think that just Zeus fighting against Kronos probably isn't what happened. Uh, I actually think that Zeus is Satan. That's probably for another show, but talked about that in many, many different places. But it does make a lot of sense that at the Tower of Babel, what the people were trying to do was somehow recontact the ancient gods, and that somebody answered, and that ends up being, like we said earlier in the show, where these heavenly beings are distributed among the nations. And then guess what could happen through that? Well, then you have your stories of these guys interacting with us, and you get giants again, which is what you find throughout the rest of your Old Testament, because they're everywhere.
Why do you think uh because your book led me to another book on giants, and this guy was has a bunch of pictures of all these giants from all over the world. Uh there's another area where we are inconsistent, like all the stories of the flood from all these different cultures, universal flood, all these skeletal remains of giants uh in Ohio and different places throughout the world, and yet we say no, the giants are yeah, so why, what happened to those bones? What do you think, something nefarious, and why Would someone want to suppress that?
Yeah, I mean the big conspiracy theory out there is that the Smithsonian, at least in North America, United States, the Smithsonian, every time that these bones were uncovered, and there's like thousands of these sites, and they're in most of the states, not all of them, but most of them, especially the Ohio Valley, on south into Mississippi Valley, up into New York and stuff like that. There's quite a few also out in California area. It's like every time that you read about what happened, you find that somebody from the Smithsonian shows up, and then the bones are never seen again. So to me, because there's so many of these accounts, I could believe that lots of them are hoaxes, but I can't believe that they're all hoaxes. That would be a more impossible conspiracy theory for me to believe than that they're,
Right, right, right,
the what I'm saying.
right.
So it seems to me that yeah, there is something nefarious that's happened. And so the question then becomes why? And the most obvious answer is that they're trying to hide our history from us. They don't want us to know what happened. First of all, it doesn't fit with the theory of evolution. It's the exact opposite of evolution. We're actually devolving from these huge, powerful creatures into what we are today. And then maybe there's even something more nefarious, which is that they've somehow used that very technology to maybe bring them back or uh, make contact with the gods themselves, or who knows what all they could be doing behind the scenes. And then this is where the blurry creatures world kind of overlaps with what we're talking about here, because you start listening to account after account after account, especially of people that have undergone like satanic ritual abuse and been whisked away to places, and they all are telling you the same story, which is that they're here, they're underground. People can do what they want to with that. I'm not going to tell you to believe it or not believe it, but I'm saying that there are lots of accounts out there of the same story, and where they're not all conspiring in some room together. They don't even know each other. They don't even know the other people tell the same story.
Right.
So how does that happen?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
was
know.
listening to Heiser because you turned me on to Heiser. Um, and when he's talking about the UFO, you know, uh, where they got probed by UFO, that it's like a connection with the satanic ritual abuse, but they just uh, describe it as, I was taken up by aliens or whatever, uh, which leads me to uh, when I asked you on Facebook uh, if you had seen the Tucker Carlson bit on
Oh yeah.
Joe Rogan. Uh, Tucker Carlson on Joe Rogan uh, talks about this uh, alien phenomenon um, as something spiritual. Do you think it's spiritual? Is it the sons of God?
So this is a great question. Christians disagree on it. Mike was more of the opinion that it's a spiritual phenomenon. Timothy Alberino, you listen to any of his shows and stuff, he's of the opinion that it's more of a physical phenomenon. Like there's actual physical creatures. And my take is that it's probably some of both. So is there a spiritual component to the UFO phenomenon? Absolutely. There's demonic stuff associated with it on almost every level. And I also think that, especially the light kind of phenomenon where it's orbs or, there's nothing tangible that you can reach out and touch or whatever, that's probably demonic. I can't say for sure, but I think so. And when I say demonic, I mean offspring of the Watchers. I mean disembodied Nephilim sort of stuff. That's the ancient view of it, of what a unclean spirit is. But having said that, I also think that there probably is a physical component to this. I'm actually quite certain of it, because when you read the accounts in the literature, this is a physical phenomenon. I mean, craft are crashing and we are retrieving them and we are reverse engineering the technology. That's not spiritual. That's not in somebody's head. That's actual presence. And then you find, bodies. The question of what the bodies are is open for debate. I don't know that they are or are not aliens. They could be people that are being used or genetically manipulated or who knows what to run the craft. There's all kinds of different possibilities, but generally speaking, I think the phenomenon is both spiritual and physical. People might not like that. I remember Hank Hanegraaff talking about one time how angels could never do the Genesis 6 thing because they're not physical. And I'm like, what are you talking about? In Genesis 18, Abraham washes their feet and they have a meal together. How's that not physical? Jacob wrestles with a man who's clearly not a human. That's physical. These creatures are physical. We entertain angels unawares, according to Hebrews. How could that be if it's all just in our head?
Right.
So yeah, the Bible definitely talks about a physicality to the spiritual, at least the watcher, sons of God, angel thing. Now, does that mean they're always physical? Are they morphing in and out of our continuum? Uh, do they somehow go to a spiritual realm and then a physical realm? I don't know how all that works. I have no idea. But when they're here, they definitely materialize and take physical presence. So why in the world would I think that's impossible to have a physical presence with the UFOs?
Right. Right.
That's only talking angels and demons. Like I'm not even adding here the possibility that there could actually be other creatures in this universe that are physical that come here. I haven't made up my mind about that one either way. I mean, I don't have a theological problem with it. People often will bring up, oh, Jesus only died for humans. Well, that's true, but it doesn't mean angels don't exist. It doesn't mean demons don't exist. It doesn't mean cows don't exist. It
Right.
doesn't
Right.
mean, you know. So, yeah, Jesus came to die for human beings. Okay, that doesn't it does Jesus doesn't he wasn't even obligated to die for us. So
Right.
let's assume that the whole universe is filled with physical beings and they're all sinful. Okay, so what? Doesn't mean God has to do anything to for them.
Right.
He wanted to die for humans because
Right.
he created us in his image. So I don't see a theological reason why that couldn't be true. But I don't have any proof.
Right. Uh, correct me if I'm wrong. I was watching the documentary, one of the episodes, uh, and you make a distinction. I think it was you about fallen angels are not demons. Can you explain that? And am I right
Yeah,
on?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is what I was just referring to. So um you have this class of being in the Bible that is referred to with many different names. In the New Testament, they're called thrones, dominions, powers, authorities, stars. Some of those are Old Testament terms as well. They're also called sons of God. They're called Elohim, which is translated as gods into English. And they're also called angels. So they have all kinds of names. They're also called watchers in Daniel 4. So to me, those are roughly all synonymous. There
Okay.
can be there can be different there can be differences, but for our purposes, they're synonymous. Okay, so these are the beings that come down in Genesis 6:1 that are called the sons of God. They see the women. The women have offspring. Those offspring are called Nephilim, which means a giant. Now, the universal interpretation of this is that worldview in the ancient church and with all the ancient Jews. It changes with the Jews about the second century. It changes in the church around the turn of the fifth century. But before that, in both those groups, that was the view. Then, then when they start talking about demons, that is unclean spirits of the New Testament, those creatures that possess people, that give them great strength, cause them to speak in other languages or whatever. Um, those unclean spirits or demons were universally believed to have been the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. So the proper way to think about it in with the first century universal view is that an angel or a watcher or son of God is the father of a demon. The demon has been disembodied because his physical body died. The father is not subject to those corruptions of the flesh like the child is, because the child's half human. So these watchers, like Satan would be one of them, has been around since the Garden of Eden. He hasn't died, but the Nephilim died. Goliath was killed. Og was killed. Those giants in Deuteronomy 2 were killed. And so what happened to them when they died? They didn't go to heaven. They didn't go to hell. They haunted the air in between and became the demons. That's the basic idea.
And that place in Israel, the gates of hell,
Gates of hell.
the is could you feel like a presence, or was there like a weird energy there, or
Some people would say that. I never did. I've never really had feelings too strong like that anywhere that I go. I'm just probably not very sensitive to it. I don't know. I know people that are very sensitive to things like that. I never felt anything strange or odd, but I tend to uh, create my worldview based upon what I know from God's word rather than how I feel about something.
okay.
And so, God's word is pretty clear that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. And Jesus said that right there at Caesarea Philippi, where they literally had something called the gates of hell, which is the cave of Pan, where the Satyr god Pan was worshipped, and there was an ancient temple that backed up to the back of it, and the worship of that entity goes back thousands and thousands of years at that place.
Wow.
That's all just data. It's historical. It just is what it is. No feelings involved.
Um, on the on the transfiguration, what is the significance of that, of Jesus doing that? And I think I heard you say something like he did it before, uh was it the Pharisees or something, that they saw it and
Not the Pharisees, the watchers. So, it, so think about this. We said earlier that the watchers came down on Mount Hermon.
right.
That's where that happened. So that actually happened to have been Mount Hermon was called the place of the divine council of the god El. And this is also likely where the Baal cycle takes place. The Baal cycle is a story where Baal, who's one of the sons of El, is usurping his brother Yam for the the title of the beloved son and the ruler prince of all the 70 sons of God. That takes place there on Mount Hermon. So what's so crazy about it is that the whole Caesarea Philippi gates of hell and then transfiguration story that happens right after it, you find all this language that is identical with Psalm 89, like probably at least 20 different overlaps.
Mm.
And so it seems to me that Psalm 89 is actually a prophecy of those two events. So my view is that when Jesus goes up on the Mount of Transfiguration, which is Mount Hermon, the very same place I just told you about, that Jesus is basically declaring to these powers on their home turf that it's not Baal or Yam that's the beloved son, but what does God say to Jesus on that mountain? This is my beloved son. He's transfigured, he's made to look like his glorious body, thereby revealing himself to these entities. And I think that when we talk about the new covenant and how it comes to us, that I think that the new covenant was cut in the blood of Jesus. And so then it's that at that moment that it can then be transferred to his disciples. And then that's what's Pentecost symbolizes. But I think that the initial historical um, uh, declaration of the new covenant, based on Psalm 89, which is what that psalm's all about, took place on the Mount of Transfiguration before it took place before the disciples. It took place before Moses and Elijah, and it took place before the invisible powers. That if you read Psalm 89, you'll see that they're there as well. And so God is declaring something super powerful at the Transfiguration that most people don't have any idea is going on.
Wow, the word of God is so rich and powerful. I really enjoyed I taught through Galatians, and your book on Galatians was just such a help to me. And it's I like the subtitle, uh supernatural.
Justification.
Yes. Yes, that that was again the worldview of most people, as you point out. They wanted to make uh that's why they renamed Paul, and was it Timothy? They call him you know,
Oh, Barnabas, yeah.
they call him
Zeus and Hermes.
yeah. That was very fast. I've read the Bible so many times, but you know, uh, uh it, unless you're guided or shown these things highlighted, um you'll miss so much.
Yeah, that comes from Acts. I forget which chapter, 16 or something like that, when Paul's in one of the cities in Galatia, and the people are there, and they're like, "Oh, well, Paul and Barnabas are Zeus and Hermes," and her Barnabas Zeus probably because of the eloquence of his speech or whatever, I think it says. But then Paul is called Hermes. When you look at Hermes, it's really interesting because he's the god of healing, among other things. And then when you read Galatians, you find this strange, like off the cuff thing in one of the later chapters where Paul basically says, I was really sick among you and I couldn't, I, God wouldn't let me be healed. Why would he say that? I think it's because they thought he was Hermes. And so, in keeping him sick, it took out of their mind that Paul was a deity, that he was this God that they were trying to worship, and it allowed the gospel to point to the actual God that they're supposed to be worshiping, which Paul went
Right,
and
right,
told them
right,
about. I
right.
mean, those are cool things to just discover.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what is your book, The Angel of the Lord, about?
That's essentially the Christ in the Old Testament, focusing on this person, the angel of the Lord. People know the title, the angel of the Lord. Um, it's found many times in the Old Testament, and basically the idea there is that the angel of the Lord is pre-incarnate Christ. I co-wrote that with a Reformed Baptist pastor friend of mine named Matt Foreman, and we take a biblical, then a historical, then a systematic view of the angel, try and work our way through the whole Bible, what it says about the angel. And he's there in more places than simply by the title angel of the Lord. He's called all kinds of things. He's called Yahweh, just Yahweh. He's called the Word of God. He's called the name of God, called the glory of God, called the arm of God. It's called the shepherd in Psalm 23. He basically is the God of Israel, Jesus. We explain why in the book that is the case. Then we take a historical view of the angel to show that yes, the church has believed this since the very beginning. And yes, it's not everybody agrees with that today, but we actually found in a very early council that I think it's called a letter to six bishops or of six bishops or something to this heretic who was saying that no, the angel is not Christ in pre-incarnate. And they basically pronounce an anathema on him because he is going against the entire tradition of church history up to that point. And then we
So,
kind of, yeah. So, I mean, that's basically what the book is.
and are do you deal with the Christophanies
Yeah, I
or
mean, that's what those are. Yeah, they're, I don't like that word just because it's so highfalutin that it tends to take out of my mind anyway that he really is there. It's not like, I mean, I think that Jesus is the God of Israel. I mean, Jacob says the God, the angel in the very same sentence. The God who did this for me, the God who did this for me, the angel who did this for me. He's identifying the angel of the Lord as his God. It's basically Trinitarianism in the Old Testament because that's the sons of God idea again, that you have a high God who has sons. This is the pagan view of it. The high God himself is created by somebody else and he can be deposed. And he has sons that are, fighting for position, jockeying to be the next ruler or whatever, these princes. The biblical view is that you have an uncreated creator called the Father who has created sons, and that these sons are placed over the nations. But one son is not created, he is unique, and he does not get any of those 70 nations that were of Babel. He gets to create a nation out of nothing. It's called Israel. He becomes its God. He's the son over it. This is Deuteronomy 32:9, by the way, for people who want to look it up. Whereas the other gods are over the other nations in 32:8. And he is the God of Israel. He's their mediator, intercessor between the Father and themselves. He becomes their God. He's the ruler of that nation. And the promise, as I said earlier, is that he will inherit all the nations, which is the whole point of the New Testament church and God creating this new people for himself that you and I both belong to, even though we're not of the same race and neither one of us are Jews.
right? The Israel of God.
The Israel of God, exactly.
Yes. Amen. How I others have asked you, but why does it matter if I don't have a supernatural view of Genesis 6? How does or if I do, how does that impact my life?
Well, it doesn't matter for your salvation. Plenty of people don't hold that view and they're saved by Jesus. First of all, we're saved by faith alone, not by believing in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, and the
Right,
Nephilim.
right,
Saved by faith alone in Christ alone. So it doesn't affect our salvation, but it does affect the way that we think about the world. It affects our understanding of who God is in the Old Testament. It affects our understanding of the bureaucracy of heaven and how that is working itself out in history. It affects our ability to comprehend this movement from the darkness of Babel to the choosing of Israel as a nation to the creation of a new people in the church. If you don't have this worldview, it's almost incomprehensible to digest what I've been talking about here. So I look at it not as a salvific issue, not that we're not able to receive the transmission and watch what God said to us, but we've been watching it in black and white. And what we've done is we've moved from 1966 to 1967, and we're now in color, full, full living color. I think that was the year. It might have been the year before that. I can remember in reruns always going, how come the first season of Gilligan's Island's in black and white and the last two are in color? Well, that was like the standard year that they changed it, right? And everything across the board then went to color TV. Star Trek happened to be made, the original Star Trek, the year they went to color. And I've often wondered if they would have put it out the year before, would it have ever made it to season two? Because it would have been black and white. As it is, it's color and it looks just like the shows we see today. That's the difference. I mean, for us older people that can remember watching reruns and seeing that, there's all the difference in the world between watching a black and white TV show and a color TV show.
yeah.
It's like moving from two dimension to three dimension, which in some ways that's what we're doing. Instead of staying on the historical plane of the earth, moving just simply left and right in history, we're able to start moving up and down as well, and seeing the interaction of heaven and earth, not just with God, but with all kinds of things that he has in play.
So how does that have you ever dealt with Mormons? I'm sure you have, but
A little. I mean, I think about how this relates to Mormons quite a bit.
because they will immediately take us to John 10, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
30, and then in uh like a hand canograph view, it's just judges, right? We It's not because they appeal to that. So I guess my question is, are we approaching that wrong?
It's
Uh,
actually funny as you say that so the John 10 thing is where Jesus says, "Does not your own scripture say I said you are gods, all of you?"
yes.
And it's this is deeply ironic because the traditional view that we've all heard is that what Jesus is doing is he's quoting basically when the Torah came to Moses on the mountain at Sinai. That's when he said, "Did I not say you're all gods?" And so then the object of who the gods are becomes the rulers of Israel. Oh, he's just saying that the Pharisees are gods, which makes no sense of the text because basically that argument would be that Jesus is saying, well, look, guys, you're getting mad at me for saying I'm one with the Father. Well, I mean, you're a God, I'm a God. What's the problem? And it actually doesn't solve his problem at all because as soon as they hear this, they get even more upset with him and say he's committed blasphemy.
Mm.
He can't possibly be saying that they're gods. Well, so here's why it's so ironic because the Mormons are essentially doing the same thing. They're saying, the Bible says that I'm a God, and here's proof of it. But now instead of it being the rulers of Israel, it's they're saying, I'm a God. You're a God. We're all gods. Wouldn't you like to be a God too? And that's Mormonism. Whereas the view that I'm giving that I got from Dr. Heiser is that Jesus is not talking about when the law came to Moses. He's talking about Psalm 82. He's literally quoting Psalm 82, where it's talking to the sons of God. I said, you are all gods. Who? The sons of God. Who are they? Go back to the first verse. They're these heavenly beings that rule in the divine council. And what Jesus is saying is that I'm one of them. Oh, but by the way, I'm not just one of them. I am superior to them in every possible way because I am one with the Father. So the irony is that people will accuse this view of being Mormon. It's actually the other view that's more Mormon than this view because I'm not claiming that I am a God, whereas the other two views are claiming that humans are gods. I'm saying that no, there are entities out there that the Bible identifies as Elohim or gods. I mean, think about Paul. He talks about Satan. He says, has not the God of this world blinded the minds of unbelievers? Well, gods aren't real. Well, so Satan's not real because that's who he's talking about. And he just called him a God. Jesus is saying, I'm one of those entities, but I'm more than that. I am one with the Father. And also, he's more than that too, because he became one of us, fully human, whereas none of those ever did.
Right. Uh, did they try to uh counterfeit by leaving their dwelling place
Maybe
and violate?
women, maybe.
Yes.
So it could be that the promise of the seed, this is all speculative to me. The promise of the seed in Genesis 3:15 that there will be a seed that will crush their seed, that they were trying to breed out any possibility that the woman could have a seed. But it could also be, so I think that that's probably what they were doing. If they could manipulate the human genome enough, then the woman could never have a seed because they would we would all be gone. we would have all turned into something else. Kind of sounds familiar with mRNA vaccine technology, but I digress. The other idea could be, though, that they are uh, I've lost my train of thought. You just said it. I just said it.
Yeah, they were trying they transgressed
In order to, yeah, emulate what would end up happening.
yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah. Uh
But what you end up getting is you end up getting demigods instead of somebody who's fully God and fully man. So Nephilim, if you think about it, like with Hercules, Hercules is the son of a human woman and a divine heavenly created being named Zeus. He's half God, half man. Gilgamesh, same thing. You find this in all the ancient cultures. The Christian worldview is not that Jesus is half God, half man, but that he's fully God, fully man. It's totally different.
right.
But that's a what you brought up there is kind of an antichrist mockery of it, or an attempt to bring it about their own way. And of course it doesn't work.
Right. Right. Yeah, and for a long time I always I have a Proto Evangelium shirt, and it has the you see like the foot of Christ and being bit by a serpent, which I've totally found fascinating, these serpent mounts that you found through Google Earth and stuff. uh what do you make of these reptilian people?
Well, they could be. So, but what we said earlier, there's more than one possibility. They could be a race that we don't know about, or to me, probably more likely is that somehow the reptilian people are actually the Watchers, because that's how the Watchers are described. I don't think, for example, Genesis 3 is talking about a snake that's possessed by the devil. I think it's actually talking about an entity that's humanoid, but also has reptilian characteristics. And I get that from reading intertestamental Jewish literature, which describes them as looking exactly that way.
Mm. But that's just myth, right?
Maybe. Yeah.
Well, I was watching one of the programs, and I think the host cited C.S. Lewis about the true myth, or
The
uh
myth, yeah, I like myth. Myth is, I like teaching people myth is not fantasy. Myth is not fable. Myth is not fiction. It can have components to it that are uh, dealing in all of that. But myth primarily is an origin story. That's all it is. So it can be either true or false or somewhere in between. Just depends on the story that you're reading.
mm,
So I think that, and I get this from Francis Schaeffer, actually, who talks about Genesis 6. He says, we've thought that this was myth for a long time, but we're learning more and more that it has some basis in historical reality. Well, yeah, that's exactly right. That's what myth is. It's teaching you an origin story using fantastical ideas that can spread throughout culture down for millennium, but those are rooted in things that actually happened.
so
Like legend is not that legend. Well, legend maybe could be. Legend becomes tall tale, right? And myth can have some components of that, but you don't. You find some of that in some of the myths, but other myths you'd read them and you're like, well, it's not really. It's not like reading Paul Bunyan or something like that, which is a totally different genre from what you get reading Homer.
when you say that the prevalent view was the supernatural view,
It was the only view.
it
It
was the
wasn't just
only
prevalent.
view.
It was the only view that there was.
And when and why did that change? And I heard you on a program say for nefarious reasons, uh, rabbis changed it or whatever.
Well, it started with the Jews. Um, and then it made its way into the Christian church over a couple of centuries. The reason it started with the Jews, I believe, is because of a guy named Jesus Christ, who was claiming to be the Son of God. And they knew full well what this meant. There was a view in Judaism that believed that there was something called two powers in heaven that were both God and yet distinct from God. It's basically an early form of Trinitarianism. And Jesus was coming into that theological milieu, and he was claiming to be the second power of heaven. And he was using the title Son of God because of it, in light of it. Well, so what happened was the rabbis eventually started to desupernaturalize the sons of God, and they turned them into these dynastic rulers, perfectly human, or they turned them in other texts into sons of Israel instead of sons of God. And by doing this, they prevented this worldview of the supernatural beings from being involved in somebody's formulation of their theology. And in doing that, they made it basically impossible for a Jew now to believe that Jesus is the Son of God, because they turned their religion into a strictly Unitarian religion, whereas that has no place in biblical Christianity, because you have to have a Trinitarian way to understand the relationship between the Father, Son, and Spirit. But in eliminating a two powers idea, you've eliminated the persons idea, the distinctions in God. That's, I mean, that is very serious. And then like they did that in very specific, very few places in their text. And then I'm convinced that what happened is over time that view just spread. And then as the church fathers of the earliest view was just lost to time, that view just kind of naturally took over. And the church fathers, I don't believe nefariously at all. They just inherited something that they started hearing. And then it got very confused and it made its way into the church. So I think with the rabbis, it was nefarious, but with the
Right.
church fathers, I think it was just ignorance.
Right. Well, I mean, uh, the reason why I believe in conspiracies is reading the Bible. You know, they conspired to murder Jesus. Which, uh, if this bill passes, which passed in the House, the new anti-Semitism bill, you won't be able to say that.
Well, I'll keep saying it. Come and arrest me. But no,
Which
I get your point. Yeah.
leads me to this book, uh, that I've given to many, many people. Uh, uh what what started you down this path?
Oh
What
man,
comes
I don't know.
first?
I've liked conspiracies
Conspiracies
forever.
or or giants?
Uh yeah, I mean kind of both. I don't know. 2020 probably mostly did, because the world had gotten crazy within a matter of weeks,
Right.
and I was trying to comprehend and understand what was going on. So I started taking a deep dive into that conspiracy theory that must not be named and looking into it. Didn't understand it very well for a couple of years, I don't think. And I wrote that book at the beginning of that journey. But I tried to make it timeless in the way that I dealt with conspiracy theories. And my whole point of that was to basically come to a conclusion of two things. First of all, conspiracy theories or conspiracies, like you just said, are real. Conspiracies exist because humans are evil.
Right.
If you deny that, then you're denying total depravity. It should actually be reformed people who believe more in conspiracy theories than others, because we say we believe in human depravity. And human depravity comes because people are, uh, conspiracies come because people are evil,
Right.
right? I
Right.
mean, I don't understand that.
Right.
But so I try to conclude and say, look, believing in conspiracy theories only, and I've seen many people go off the deep end on this, they get to a point where it's almost like they're so shattered in their view of reality that they can't believe in anything other than conspiracy theories.
Right. Well, I
But
think
and
it's
that can be
because they don't have
dangerous.
God. I mean, they don't have
Well, no,
hope.
I've seen Christians do this,
Oh,
Jose.
really?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like they get to the point where they feel like they can't trust anything but God. And so everything in the world becomes a conspiracy theory. And anything that the world has ever told me about God or about the world is a conspiracy theory or is a conspiracy. I think that this is probably what's going on in the flat earth stuff. They can't believe anything anymore. And so everything becomes a conspiracy and
Right,
everything comes up for grabs.
right,
And it can be a dangerous thing to have your mind in a place where you can't trust anything anymore,
right,
whether you're a Christian or not. But I also think, that of the two sides of this, that's the one most people talk about. The one not talked about often enough is that not believing in conspiracy theories can be very dangerous because if there are actual conspiracies to say, I don't know, transform humanity into something, humanity 2.0 through an mRNA vaccine, and to destroy who we are as people and to obliterate 16 out of 17 people on Earth, if those are really going on, and I'm not willing to entertain it, that idea, and then all of a sudden it shows itself right in front of me, and I'm not willing to look at it, well, the consequences can be deadly,
right, right.
very serious. So,
Why do you think pastors shy away from political discourse? Uh, I mean, when I think about the early church Christians saying Christ is Lord, I mean that was the most political statement they could make. They weren't paying homage or burning incense to Caesar. Why why does it seem that the current pastor is so limp-wristed, so weak? That's why I mean I was drawn to you. I uh Doug Giles is another guy who helped me during COVID. Uh in his book, if masculinity is toxic, call Jesus radioactive. That was his book. And he was talking about COVID. He was talking about all of these things in a very blunt way. um and but your book, it, it just it gave me courage, it gave me strength, and whenever I talk to other pastors, to hear them say Jesus would wear a mask because that's the loving thing to do is like, well, Jesus would have healed COVID, first of all. And he would not encourage you to take an mRNA vaccine. Like, why the weakness? Uh why?
so I think there's a lot of different reasons, and they may not be all the same for the same person. And some person might have more than one of these going on together. So just off the top of my head, trying to think through why would people do this? One reason is because we won't entertain conspiracies in our mind. We refuse to do that. One of the things I point out in the book is that this entire country was based on conspiratorial thinking. That's the whole point of fighting against the Empire of Britain, is that we believed that they were conspiring against us for our evil. So in not entertaining conspiracy thinking, you're not able to process what's going on in front of you because you don't have the categories for it. Now, side by side with that, I think there's this implicit trust that we have in our leadership. This is what I was just talking about on the other end of it, that you have people that get to the point where they're so shattered and broken that they feel like they can't trust anything. It could very well be that it's because those people were putting all of their trust in everything that they heard. They weren't thinking critically about anything.
Right.
And then all of a sudden something came along and destroyed that. And so they go to the whole other side of it and they're not able to trust anything. So we're not learning critical thinking skills, and we're not putting them into practice for the course of our life. And then all of a sudden something hits us and we're blindsided. Now there's other things also going into play too, and that aren't our fault. Like there is real, first of all, there's a supernatural war that's against us. I wonder how many people actually believe that that's true, that Satan really does want to destroy humanity and especially Christians, and that he's working um, day by day to do that. It's almost like we say, no, no, he's not really. And so there's no conspiracy in the supernatural realm against us. And then there's this implicit, well, there's the lies that come to us through the media. You remember when Trump started talking about fake news and he gave that as kind of a trope for the
Mm-hmm.
world. When he said that, it made everybody infuriated and nobody could believe that it was true. Well, 8 years later, here we are, and most people today believe that the news is fake.
Right.
It did something. But one
Right.
of the things it did is it revealed that, look, the news has never been what you thought it was. I mean, even going back to the days of the 1980s and the book Amusing Ourselves to Death that was put out by Neil Postman, where he talks about things like how news has never been here to actually give you the news, it's been here to entertain you.
Right.
Um, well, we've just bought hook, line, and sinker into a form of propaganda that we never realized was propaganda, let alone the fact that at some point in time it got co opted very deliberately to become a very, not just a form of propaganda that entertains us, but a form of propaganda that actually feeds us false information
Right.
and lies to us
Right.
because it's been corrupted by big money and people that have taken it over for that purpose, very much like what was going on in Germany. Like there are so many Christians who even to this day go, no, that couldn't possibly be true. And so they just don't like if CNN says it, MSNBC says it, NBC, CBS, ABC says it, Fox News says it. I just believe it. And
Right.
anybody who disagrees with that line of reasoning is crazy.
Right.
And then you've got the theology that's going into it. So you've got all kinds of weird things happening with the way people think that a Christian is supposed to be involved with their government. Like we'll take one thing, Romans 13, and we'll run with it as if that's the only thing the Bible says about how Christians
Right.
are to interact with their government.
Right.
Or we have maybe a view of Jesus that's some sort of a hippy dippy Jesus or something, like he never engaged in politics at any level, and so therefore never should we. I mean, there's just so many things that are going into this,
Right.
and it's been the perfect storm, I think. And so I don't know that Christians are doing it on purpose. I think there's a lot of ignorance out there. A lot of there's culpability because people shouldn't have fallen for this kind of stuff, but they have. And so, what's our job today is to do the best that we can and try and help people see what's actually happening, at least as far as we understand it to be. Try and open up dialogue and discussion about it
Right.
and try and make some progress.
Right. I mean, I think that's why in a way people that are talking about it, they resonate with them because their pastors are not talking about it. They won't, you know, give them truth. Like I remember talking with another pastor and saying, I can't allow people to just continue to live in a lie. I'm not gonna promote, I'm not gonna be like, don't wear a mask, but don't uh but again, uh don't force others to wear a mask. I mean, it came down to something as simple, but it's a It's a nefarious lie because now to not wear the mask is unloving because Jesus would.
Yeah, which is what the media is telling people, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, it's that simple.
Yeah.
And that what we have to recognize that people have been duped and they've been fooled, and it's not necessarily their fault. And so, you can go about telling people the truth in more than one way. You can be a hammer and just smash people.
Right.
I don't think that really does a lot of good for them
Right.
because they're not willing to listen to you anyway. You treat it like, I mean, it is what it is, and people are where they're at. You can come to the realization that probably I'm not going to be able to do a lot to change their mind in the short term, but maybe long term, I can have some sort of an impact. We need to always be sure that we are, in fact, loving our brothers even when we disagree with them.
Right.
And it can be a hard thing. One other thing that I thought about why some, maybe in our circles, um, haven't been as quick to talk about the truth is because it seems like there's like one group of Christians that have stood up. And so that group of people becomes kind of demonized or put into a pigeonhole. And if they have a worldview that's causing them to do something that I'm not doing, or they have a worldview that is different on eschatology or something, it's like it all gets lumped in together. And so then it's easier for me to pick on that group of people and throw the whole thing out because I don't believe what they believe about this. It's
Right.
a weird sort of a thing. But I think that that's happened. You got in my circles, you've got most of us are all mill, and there's a lot of people that really, really don't like Doug Wilson. Like they really, really don't like him. And so let's say that you have, it's an eschatology thing, or it's a personality thing, or they think that they don't like the way that he interacts with whatever. Okay, so they've got this already there. And then they see him and a whole bunch of other people that agree with him. They're the only ones standing up against the mask mandate. Well, so guess what's so easily done? You just go, oh, well, it's coming from this thing that I don't like over here. So
Right.
therefore, he's got to be wrong about the mask thing.
The Moscow mood.
Yeah, it's exactly so there's lots of things that are going into play with
Right.
it, but
Right. So, um, why didn't you become Presbyterian?
because
I'm
they're
glad you're
wrong, man.
Reformed Baptist.
They're wrong, dude. They're wrong.
I really, uh, in your Waters of Creation book, you want to purchase that online. Uh, I liked how you talked about how in many cultures, water is seen as cleansing, as a form of baptism, but that the waters uh, preceded circumcision, was alongside circumcision, and is after circumcision. I that for me was like wow, and the view of Jesus taking the Levitical rite, doing uh the baptism of John before he started his ministry just made so much sense. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean that's like lots of shows in one, but the short of it is that basically I asked the question, why was Jesus baptized? Question that's not usually asked, and he actually tells us why. He says it was to fulfill all righteousness. So you have to ask, well, what does that mean? As he goes into the water and he goes to John, and John says, and I need to be baptized by you. John's baptizing for repentance. So it appears that John thinks Jesus is coming to be baptized for repentance. Jesus says, no, I have to fulfill all righteousness. And that causes John to change his mind. He goes, oh, okay. So then he baptizes him. So something changed in John's mind when Jesus said that. When you go and read Matthew's gospel, you see that fulfilling all righteousness always has to do with something obeying the law of Moses. it happens many times throughout that gospel. And so that leads you to start asking, well, what could he be obeying or fulfilling? What's he doing? So when you start to put the puzzle pieces together, that Jesus is 30 years old and he's starting his ministry when this happens. All kinds of things are going on there. You realize that, oh, Jesus is actually fulfilling a baptismal ordination covenantal rite of the Old Testament, the ordination of the priest. And
Right.
then you go, well, now wait a minute. If it's covenantal because it comes from the covenant of Levi and it's an ordination that brought somebody into that covenant community, then this is exactly what the Presbyterians say about circumcision. But the problem is that this is something totally different. And so basically, my view is that the circumcision, Jesus underwent circumcision already when he was 8 days old, just like he was supposed to fulfill all righteousness. Now he's doing this when he's 30 years old because he's fulfilling another covenantal ordination. And so that leads you to ask the question, where's baptism coming from? Is it coming from an idea of circumcising infants? No, because he's 30 years old. It's coming from a sacramental ordination ceremony, ushering him into the priesthood. And so, in that way, baptism is coming from baptism. It's not coming from circumcision. Baptism is coming from the baptismal rite of 30-year-olds, not from an infant rite of circumcision. And now all of a sudden that opens up whole new ways of thinking about why we're baptized as Christians, why we don't baptize infants as Baptists, and so on and so forth. So that's the short of it.
Okay. And you get your latest sermon on Sermon Audio, right?
Yeah, from last week.
You,
It's May 30th today, so whatever Sunday would have been, May 25th or 26th, something like that,
yeah.
of 2024.
Um. So I want to do something fun since we're gonna wrap it up. I just these are questions. Uh, what would you build if you had unlimited resources?
um, dude, I have no clue. A really cool publishing company.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Beat out Amazon, right?
A really, really amazing golf course.
Are you a golfer?
Yeah.
And you live in Colorado, right?
Yep.
Denver or
Yeah, I'm north of Denver.
okay. Okay. And what is the name of your church?
The Reformed Baptist Church of Northern Colorado, closer to Boulder.
So are you guys Reformed Baptist?
We are 1689 Reformed Baptists.
Okay. Uh I have I listened to Keith Foskey and he was explaining he does a lot of funny videos. I'm sure you've seen them about Methodist, Presbyterian, uh and uh he um he explained why his church embraced the 1646
Uh huh.
confession. Um and I have trouble, and so maybe you can explain it better. Like how a lot of 1689 that I've talked to or podcasts that I've listened to, you don't go to restaurants, you don't compel others to work. What is your view?
I think I think that the Sabbath is a biblical principle, and we should honor the Sabbath. Um, and that Christians changed it to Sunday because God changed it to Sunday in light of the eighth day Sabbaths of the feasts, um, which happens to be first day Sabbaths of the feasts of Israel, which are always foreshadowing and picturing for us the finished or the new creation. So Sabbath is the old finish of the old creation. The Christian Sabbath is the beginning of the new creation. And it's a biblical principle, and we need to honor that, and we need to worship God on that day and set it aside as a unique day. But I think that the recreations clause, that's in the 1689, because it's also in the Westminster Confession, is just going beyond what the text actually bears. And so that's the application in the 1689 of the principle. The principle is strong. The application, maybe not as much. And so our church doesn't tell people that they can't go out and eat on Sunday. And a lot of people do that. And they'll say, you're not really truly confessional. But that's why I'm part of a network of churches that are hold to a substantial subscription and not absolute jot and tittle subscription,
Okay.
as if
Okay.
the confession is inerrant.
Right, right, right. That's what sometimes it seems like they know the uh I don't know if you're familiar with like American Baptists that because they were liberal, they were allowing women to preach and pastor. So then they started embracing homosexuality. So uh they more conservative, uh anti LGBT, um because of the scriptures, they broke away. Um they they're uh lenient on confessions and stuff, but uh in my experience I went to one, and these people knew the bylaws better than the Bible. Sometimes I feel that confessional people know the confession better than the Bible.
Yeah, yeah. That's a tendency that can be out there that I've seen for sure. And it's frustrating. And they love exegesis of theology and systematics and philosophy, and you try and get them to actually look at the text, and they call you a biblicist. But that's not inherent to confessionalism. To me, the Confession of Faith lays it out in the first chapter by itself. And it says, look, this is not the ultimate standard of truth. It explicitly says it. The scripture is. And so this is a secondary standard. And if we're treating the secondary standard as the main standard, then we've deviated and we're actually, ironically, not being confessional.
Right, right. What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were little?
Nothing, man. A golfer was probably about it. And I wasn't good enough to do it. So
What is your worst childhood memory?
my worst childhood memory. I don't know, man. I had a pretty good childhood.
Oh,
And probably if I had a memory, it would have been blocked out and I don't remember it, because you tend to forget those kinds of things.
are your parents still alive, or
Yeah, they're both still alive.
oh, and they now I heard you say you were like one of two natives in
Yeah,
Colorado.
exactly. Colorado has been Californicated, as we call it.
Californicated.
California, yeah, you're in California, so
Yeah, yeah.
you probably don't hear that a lot. But all of us Western states say that.
Yeah, Arizona
You've
and
you've had your utopia that you've destroyed, and so now all of those
yeah.
people that have destroyed it have decided, well, let's go to another place and see if it works there.
Well, you know what's funny is I'm from LA and I moved east. I'm closer to I'm in 29 Palms. I don't know if you know where that's at, but
Hmm.
I'm near Joshua Tree, and a lot of Europeans come to the national park because they say that like that's one of the best rock climbing places in the world. Um, and so people out here have bumper stickers that say "Go back to LA."
They're
um,
Californicating California.
that's right. That's right. Are you gonna do a follow up to your conspiracy theory book?
Not that I'm planning on.
And uh where can I will put links to your website, but your podcast is Giant Steps.
Which is on the pot, which is on the website. Yeah.
Okay. And your website is
Just my name, DouglasVanDorn.com.
okay. And not to be confused with Douglas Ruthie.
Grotheis, yeah.
How do you pronounce his last
His
name?
his name is Grotheis. It's
Oh,
German.
oh,
Grotheis.
okay, okay. I always
No, it's
pronounce
no, it's
it.
actually Dutch. I shouldn't say it's German. I get in trouble for saying that. But yeah, it's pronounced Groot Heiss.
Okay.
He was my professor at the school.
Oh, he was your professor.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we're friends.
Okay. So, um, and he's Anglican, right?
He is now. He wasn't when I knew him,
Okay.
but there's not a lot of great churches in Denver, and he found a good the guys at that church are pretty decent. So he
Okay.
ended up converting, I guess.
Now, is Anglican closer to Catholicism or
Well, yeah, Anglicanism was called the middle way between Protestants and Catholics when Queen Elizabeth I was the queen because she had taken over the throne after the reign of Bloody Mary, who killed all the Protestants. And before that, they had kicked all the Catholics out of England. So there had been just bloodshed. And so she said, we need to find something that's going to appease everybody. So essentially, Anglicanism is Roman worship without calling it the Mass. I don't think they call it the Mass, and with Protestant theology, actually Reformation theology. So it's a
hmm,
weird thing.
wow. Yeah, because they wear the priest
Yeah,
collar?
yeah, they
Yeah.
are. It's Catholic to the bone,
Wow.
except for they have Protestant theology.
Huh. But they don't adhere to the Westminster or the
No, they have the 39 articles, which are essentially the same. It's their version of Westminster
are
Confession.
they the ones that use the common book of prayer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Doug, it's been a blast for me. Thank you so much
No, I'm
for
glad to do it,
your
Jose.
time. And I really hope that people out there in the interwebs are encouraged um, to pursue truth in the scriptures and to fix our eyes on Jesus because he's our only hope. I mean, I I don't I can't imagine Christians losing all faith in everything. That was shocking to me. But thank you for your time, and you do have a page on Facebook, right? Other
Yeah,
than
I think it's
your
just my
personal.
name.
Okay,
People can go
yeah,
there. I don't
I
do a
would
lot with it,
encourage
but
people to look you up. I just find your posts encouraging when I get disheartened and I see everything that's going on. Uh, is Trump convicted? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know what
Okay.
has happened.
All right. Well, we'll have to see. But thanks again for your time and hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Thanks for watching. God bless.